Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Lunenfeld. I am a professor in design media arts, and I cannot tell you how delighted I am to introduce Dr. Strangeloop tonight. I normally don't come off as a fanboy, but I am, at least in this case. This talk was actually generated by my being perhaps the oldest person at Coachella, hobbling from one EDM show to another, and I literally felt like I walked into the future when I saw Flying Lotus's show this past year. I'd been aware of Flying Lotus. I think a lot of you are aware of his work, and I'd seen him once before, but not in a kind of like full-blown situation. He actually played here in this room 6 or 7 years ago, I think. UCLA is famous for getting people before they blow up. Guns N' Roses played for $40 at $40 in beer at a fraternity party like 4 days before they signed their big contract, and never did that again. Never say never with those guys. So who is Dr. Strangeloop? He is David Wexler. He's an audiovisual artist based here in Los Angeles and the founder of Strangeloop Studios and Teaching Machine, which is an AV think tank that I really want an invitation to at some point. That's just like no pressure, man. He has provided visuals for, and I'm not going to read every name on this list because it would sound like the best track list on KCRW yesterday. Erykah Badu, DJ Snake, Eamon Tobin, one of my all-time favorites, Kid Koala, Flying Lotus, Daedalus, Skrillex, The Glitch Mob. Okay, that's just like the first, Gaslamp Killer, Marianne Hobbs, Cut Chemist. Again, that's just this tiny selection of people that he's worked with. I actually wrote a piece for Artforum about the impact of the Art and Technology show at LACMA from 1967 to 1971 on the cultural ecology of Southern California over the last 40 years. And I think the kind of work that you're going to see today really exemplifies that there's this mix of art and technology, of media art and design that really exemplifies the kind of work that I think we do and want to do in this department. And for those of you who are undergrads in this department, I actually was talking to David earlier and asked him, if we could talk about how it is you get from A to Z, right? What are those other letters that get you there? What are the people you choose to work with? And sometimes even more importantly, the people you don't work with. But tonight, I think he's going to concentrate on the people he's worked with and the work that he's done. And I'm just delighted to welcome David Wexler, AKA Dr. Strangeloop.
All right. That was a really good introduction. I have to try to live up to that. So the first thing I actually wanted to talk about was this talk, because I really dreaded the idea of putting together some sort of PowerPoint presentation and going that whole route. And what I realized was I, use this software a lot, Resolume, for all of my live video stuff. And I thought, you can show images and you can have video and audio. So I thought it'd be a lot more fun to load up a bunch of stuff in here, and with only a kind of loose plan of where we're going, just sort of start to play things for you guys and talk about it and talk about the process of getting to design the sort of shows I've been involved in. And I think it was something that, that started in a totally different world. It wasn't actually, related with video for me, and it eventually became something that was, based in video. But so I really wanted to use Resolume because it means I can just,
the ancient Japanese considered the go board
at any point,
to be
play
a
something totally
microcosm of
bizarre
the
and
universe.
just make things more
Although,
interesting.
when it is empty, it appears to be simple and ordered. The possibilities of gameplay are endless. They say no two Go games have ever been alike, just like snowflakes. So, the Go board actually represents an extremely complex and chaotic universe. And that is the truth of our world, Max. It can't be easily summed up with math. There is no simple pattern.
But as a Go game progresses, the possibilities become smaller and smaller. The board does take on order. Soon all the moves are predictable.
So?
Maybe, even though we're not sophisticated enough to be aware of it, there is a pattern, an order, underlying every Go game. Maybe that pattern is like the pattern in the stock market. The Torah, this 216 number.
This is insanity, Max.
Or maybe it's genius.
So I have no idea why I wanted to play that clip. I just wanted to play it for you guys, and that's a lot of this talk is going to be like that. I'm just giving you the heads up. I'm going to, play stuff that has inspired me and stuff that's kind of put me on my specific route to making computer graphics, sort of like this. So, how did I get into all this stuff? What I realized recently, more than ever, was that my grandfather, Haskell Wexler, played a really big role in getting me into thinking about media in a different way. And I come from a family of filmmakers, but my grandpa was kind of always the patriarch, the head of our whole family in a way, and really inspired everyone in a lot of different ways. And he was a cinematographer and documentary filmmaker who was really a legend in the field. He filmed films like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and In the Heat of the Night, and but more than just being an incredible cinematographer, he embodied something philosophically that I thought was incredible, that I always kind of aspired to, which is he questioned media. He always sort of wanted to know what was put into it and what was being sold through it, or basically he wanted to really understand media and how it affects us, and not just be a passive sort of passive recipient of media. And he passed away a month ago, and it was very difficult for our whole family. But I realized more than ever that that he basically got me on this road to doing everything I do now, and so I'm really thankful for having him in my life. And so even though I'm going to be showing you a lot of really crazy stuff today that might not be in line with what he was involved with, he was really the beginning of all this work for me. And so before I even got into any sort of video, I was kind of a graphomaniac. I would just draw all the time, and it was pretty obsessive, actually. At certain points, it was just kind of almost like therapy, just trying to kind of put all these thoughts down on paper. And I still draw to this day, and usually it's a part of the process for making visual shows, but it's usually an indirect kind of thing. I might not be, drawing exactly what I'm going to see in Cinema 4D in the end, but it's a way of sketching out ideas and sort of clarifying what's in my mind. So basically, there's definitely things I was always interested in philosophically, and patterns I was interested in, and this kind of free flowing sense that I could get with drawing, where I didn't really know where it was going, and I could sort of discover something in the process. And I think I got into video when I realized that I could do that same thing with media. I could, actually use video in sort of a spontaneous way, and not just have to make a film and present it, but I could actually, sort of have my hands in the process in real time. And that's what being a VJ is, which I really don't like the term, but it's basically the most common term that's used for someone that's like, cutting up media in real time and delivering it for an audience, usually in a concert setting. So these are just some of my drawings over the years. Batman. And actually, at a certain point, I tried to kind of bring my drawings into video and also score it with my own music. So this is a little example of kind of trying to bring some of the graphic work together with some of the drawings and music. So yeah, that was basically kind of finding out how the drawings could actually be brought into the world of video and juxtaposed with video work that I was doing. But yeah, I think that even before I was doing visuals for concerts, I was kind of obsessed with a lot of, I guess, avant-garde film and media, and so I was making lots of different short films, and I still make short films sometimes, but a lot of the work gets channeled into concerts at this point. But this was an early and, for some reason, low resolution example of some experimental film I was working on a long time ago. I feel like this should be viewed smaller since it's so low resolution. Around this time was also when I discovered the name Strangeloop, and so you'll notice in this video it is actually a strange loop, and Strangeloop is a technical term for a kind of tangled hierarchy. It's like an infinite recursive sequence. So this is actually some of the same shots looping over and over again, but kind of dissolving to themselves in a semi-imperceptible way. And I always really liked that term Strangeloop, because there was a lot of artists that I had seen in the past, like MC Escher, who utilized the Strangeloop to sort of, they would be able to depict a certain kind of paradox visually with it. There's also a book from Douglas Hofstadter called I Am a Strange Loop, which posits that consciousness is a kind of strange loop within our nervous systems. So I loved all these ideas, and I thought it was just a fun kind of name to philosophically describe some of the things I was interested in. But over time, I think I just started getting more and more enmeshed in computer graphics, and so I started making short films that were really just kind of experiments in form using computer graphics. I also love the idea that you could maybe have a film that, was a microfilm, like 20, 30 seconds long, and it didn't have to tell a specific story, but it could just be some sort of eruption of imagery. There's the film. And I think it's interesting because I was really inspired more by a lot that was going on in kind of the most trippy sides of cinema and trying to bring that into the work that I was doing, rather than just having kind of traditional narratives. And films like 2001 or Enter the Void, my favorite part was always when everything would just go completely haywire, and you'd descend into some sort of vortex of imagery. And I just, for some reason, always thought that was the coolest part of those films. And so I started making films that were basically just those sequences. So for instance, this film, Enter the Void, this is just a little scene from it. Which this is a character smoking DMT.
Wow. It's already
hallucinatory chemical.
This is it. Started. Oh god. This is the best. What if you're fainting? You're not gonna faint. You're just gonna go down. Just before every month.
So I mean, for me, I saw this stuff and I thought, I just want a whole film of this. And I think I've been really lucky in the work of designing concert visuals, because there doesn't always have to be a narrative. You can actually just experiment with video and make whatever you want to see, even if it doesn't have a linear story. So I'm not gonna lie, I saw this stuff and I thought, I wanna do that, and I wanna do it for a career. I just wanna make that sort of imagery, and not as a visual effects person, but as just, that being sort of what I'm doing for my art all the time. And so this is actually, let me show you a clip with audio. This is me just ripping off Enter the Void, really. So some of these images were really grown more than designed, and I loved it with software like Cinema 4D and some particle systems and some turbulence. You could really create forms that you didn't have to design. You could kind of just grow them and see what they do basically, and then be more like a documentary filmmaker, but in this otherworldly space. There's both my music and my video work. This too long though, I'm going to get hypnotized and I'm not going to be able to do this talk. So basically, at a certain point, I wanted a little bit more narrative, so I started creating kind of mini sci-fi films that I thought didn't really follow traditional sci-fi formats and were also venues where I could have these kinds of bizarre explosions of imagery. And so one example of that was a film I made called Amnesia. It goes on much longer, but I'll cut it off there. And I mean, I've always had fun making films, but one of the components that I thought was lacking from the process for me was that interactive element of actually being able to fuck with the media in real time and kind of mess it up. And that's, you know, where VJing came in, and I started realizing that not only could I kind of make some media and show it, I could actually, you know, mess it up in real time. So I didn't have to, you know, just play the film for someone. I could do what I'm doing right now, which is just completely fuck with it in real time. And you know, make media something which is expressive and live and improvisational. And so most of the time when I'm doing concerts, I'm not controlling the music as well, but I'm listening to the music and then responding in a way to create some sort of visual experience. And increasingly, there's a lot of concerts where that's not necessarily needed because on a certain scale, there's time-coded elements, and you don't always have to be there kind of doing the visuals live. But that's basically how I got my start, was doing it all live. And with, for instance, Flying Lotus's show, that's completely a live experience. It's all us pushing buttons, and there's, you know, not any time-coded elements or any MIDI relationship between his computer and the computer's triggering the visuals. So I think I'm going to get into some of the visual show stuff, which is probably what might be more interesting to some of you. So these are some of the clients that my studio's worked with, and just sort of quickly going through kind of the process of creating a visual show. There's initially a lot of reference that is brought up, different images and different, you know, ideas about what the show could be about, and imagery that the artist likes or that is related with their iconography. And so, for instance, with the weekend show, after we had some basic ideas of maybe what they would want, I started putting together some kind of maps of the show, and this is actually where you can see, like, I'm basically drawing it out initially, and kind of figuring out the different acts and what they're going to be composed of. And then, whoa, I have no idea why it's doing that, but it's really cool. All right. So, wow, it's doing it with all of them. All right. And that's how you make a visual show. What the fuck? That is dope. And now it's frozen. Technical difficulties. 1 minute. Just going to reboot Resolume. So yeah, but it's a process that you know, sometimes are talking to the musician about, and sometimes there's lots of other people involved that you know, are part of the creative process of really creating the imagery for the show. And obviously there's a lot of components that are not just artistic. There's lots of engineers involved, and to actually deliver these visual shows on time, usually it's a lot of animators and a lot of people working together, because the timelines in the music industry are very short generally. It's like, you know, the joke is that you'll get a call and in a week or two they want some crazy visual show and you have to tell them it's impossible. Because generally it's, at least like 6 weeks to put together a full show's worth of content. And it really depends on how complex it is too, because nowadays some of these productions are almost like mini film productions. It's, you have all the same elements of pre-visualization for different scenes and storyboarding and all that sort of stuff. So, yes, it works. Okay. So yeah, these were thumbnail sketches that I did for the weekend show. And, I always do these things and I wonder if anyone even understands what any of it means. And really it's more initially for me to think about different sequences, because when I look at these, I know, okay, this sequence has this sort of particle system doing this and that, and it's a way for me to recall it, and then eventually kind of start fleshing it out a little bit more. And what you end up with at a certain point is a kind of a document that really, just outlines everything that you're going to do in the visual show in kind of a storyboard format. And it's really useful, this sort of thing, because it's mostly composed of reference imagery, but some imagery that we've developed in-house over the years, and everyone can look at it and say, all right, this is working or this isn't working. And at this point in the process, that's really, really important, because you don't want to be caught in the last week of production and have a whole bunch of changes that totally mess things up, because obviously animation takes time, rendering the stuff takes time. So I wanted to show you this one specifically because there's actually one board down here at the bottom where there's kind of this monolithic form, and I've actually got a little clip where you can see it in concert. So that's an example, even though sometimes there's a lot of changes in the process, that's an example of almost, pretty accurate sort of translation of this board to the live concert experience. So, not only have I kind of been really interested in the concert design element, but I also, with certain artists, I really like to be able to be involved in creating promotional materials for them. If they have a really compelling kind of world that they're dealing with in their music, it's really fun to be able to kind of make some sort of video materials that will accompany album releases. So this is a short example of something I did for Skrillex and Boys Noise. And if anyone has epilepsy, they should go out of the room. Okay, that's too much. I'm going to turn off. So, yeah, a lot of the promos I make tend to be very kind of crazy and abrasive. I don't know why I do that, but the artists seem to like it. And so this is another promo for Flying Lotus.
Hold my hand, laying in the bed. Family crying, they think he dead.
So yeah, but some promos I've done have been a little bit more on the kind of ambient side or mellow side. This is a promo I did for Eskimo, which is utilizing free software, Mandelbulber, to create 3D fractals, kind of like natural formations. Simulated natural formations. So, yeah, that's some of the basics I want to talk about. Again, one reason why I really wanted to use Resolume was that I could actually maybe give you guys a demonstration of performing live visuals utilizing a clip that pre-existed but will be recontextualized in this talk to music. So I'll just show you right now a clip from a film I really like, Ghost in the Shell 2. And then I'll take the clip and I'll cut it up in real time and show you what it's like recontextualized with different music. I hope these people don't sue me because I've played this clip like 10,000 times at different concerts. Okay, so obviously this is really beautiful stuff, but I've actually cut it up here in Resolume and taken out some of the credits, so it'll just be the imagery. And now I'll just show you an example of using it for visuals. So yeah, I actually want to show you kind of a part of the process that you might not see ever when you're at one of the concerts. So here's Resolume, and you can actually see these different clips here that I was just triggering. This is kind of a lot of the clips taken from Ghost in the Shell and then randomized, so we're just kind of jumping through it. But then there's also little portions that I selected, so these can be re-triggered. And then of course there's also effects that can be applied to it. I think at some point I've been accused of using way too many strobes and everything, and I think that is completely correct. But it's really, really fun. So yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to talk about, and at this point I guess we're going to open it up to a Q&A, and I really appreciate you guys having me here. UCLA, this is fantastic, and thank you so much.
Since we're live streaming this, which is only appropriate, please talk into the microphone as you come around. Questions?
What is your relationship with these patterns in nature, and what does replicating them in your own ways mean to you?
You know, it's interesting when I was starting to get into video art in general, I was really inspired more by images I was seeing coming out of science than I was, images coming out of the art world. And I thought, if you look at anything under a microscope, it's infinitely surreal and incredible, and it's like the best art you could possibly imagine. You can't even imagine. It's just beyond comprehension. And so I got really interested in ways of sort of bringing some of that chaotic order into whatever I was working on in graphics. And I discovered this whole kind of world that really usually is dedicated towards creating realistic visual effects, like fluid simulations or particle simulations, or emulating forms in nature. And so I've kind of been a student of that specific world of visual design, of trying to invoke natural patterns in computers. And I mean, now it's, we do have the computing power to really create some very genuinely systems which genuinely complex systems which don't rival nature, obviously, but certainly emulate it and take a cue from it. And I love that you could have visual design that is anchored in that, as opposed to just, you know, my own concept of what, you know, what I should do with the work. It's always a cool thing to sort of look to nature to pull, you know, pull inspiration from.
Would you consider yourself a spiritual person?
I don't know. I think I'm a cosmic pessimist, but I do. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the term I'm like really allergic to, because I just think, God, you know, what am I going to be associated with or whatnot? And I do feel like I'm looking for something though through video, and it is something, I guess, for lack of a better term, spiritual. I'm trying to, you know, discover more about myself and the universe, and it's definitely not just a kind of purely technical design fascination or something like that. It's really, I'm trying to search through the media to find something interesting, and that is a spiritual process in a way for me. I was told to wait until you had the microphone.
What was the software you said you used for the Eskimo promo?
Oh, it's a Mandelbulber, which is, it's free software, and you can create these incredible 3D fractals, and there's a whole community online of people that are creating a lot of work with it. And it's a fascinating example that ties into what I was just talking about, in that if you use this software, it's basically, you know, it's iterating simple rules many, many times and creating very complex results. But when you see these things rendered, I mean, it's like, you wonder how anyone could possibly design this stuff, and it's not, you know, it sort of opens you up in a way to this other world of design, which is natural design. It's, you know, it's all around us. It's not just something being thought up by someone. It's natural processes in the universe that are kind of unfolding. And I think, fractals in general are a great example of these natural processes, and it's really fun. If you get Mandelbulber, you'll just be sitting in front of the computer for days and days, because it's pretty hypnotic and really cool.
I was wondering what you think the difference in like the audience experience when the media is time coded opposed to improvised?
That's a really cool question. You know, I think one of the key things that is missing with time-coded shows is that you can't fuck up in general. I mean, there could be, I don't know, some catastrophic failure of all the systems, but in general, it's set up to be pretty bulletproof, and that takes away on some level because it can't all collapse at any moment and just turn into garbage. And I think that's actually one of the things that makes live video exciting, is, you know, when it's not time coded, and when it's a response, when it's someone actually kind of using the computer as a visual instrument to respond to music. But at the same time, there is things that can be accomplished with time code that you just cannot accomplish as someone sitting there pushing buttons. And so I totally respect that there's shows where it really makes sense to have it time coded, and I've worked on more and more shows that are time coded, and at this point I don't think it's inherently bad or anything, but it is a different audience experience, and maybe a lot of people aren't even thinking about it, but it's just the fact that if you go to see a show where there's actually a VJ there kind of responding, it might be a different show every time. And if you see the time-coded show, then, you know, if you've seen it, you've kind of seen it, just from the visual show standpoint. And so that's where I think there's pros and cons for both of them. But for me, I've loved, I mean, this, like, even doing that for me is so much fun. Like, and I could do it forever, just to be able to play with video in a way. And I feel like it's kind of empowering because, you know, we live in a world where we're bombarded by media, and even that strobe for me is like, kind of like taking back control over it, saying like, I'm kind of manipulating it and I'm wielding it, and that's, you know, something which is invaluable to me. I would be doing it even if I wasn't, you know, paid to do it.
How many like minutes of content do you develop for like let's say like an hour show, or like what's like how much do you seek to produce per like show, I guess?
Generally, you know, you can stretch out content a lot, because especially if you make seamless loops that kind of return to themselves, like you can, you know, have a 3-minute song and it only has a minute of content. So for an hour show, obviously depending on the show, you know, it's more like maybe 30 minutes of content, 35 minutes of content, that eventually is kind of, if it's a time-coded show, edited and, you know, drawn out to sort of to fit with the tracks. And so, you know, it really depends, but often you're not making the full hour's worth of content, and that would be a really difficult task with a lot of the timelines that are being that they hit me up with all the time, and it drives me crazy. But yeah, so you can, with seamless loops, really stretch things out. And sometimes we use this process of kind of dividing loops into different categories, so that even if we don't have a locked track, we have enough material that we can use for that track. Like there might be passive loops, active loops, burst loops, and the idea is that these are kind of loops that could fit many different scenarios. If there's a part of the track that's more mellow and not, you know, high energy, then maybe the passive loop would work fine. Or if there's a part that's more, you know, percussive, then you use burst clips to kind of accentuate different parts of the song. So yeah, it really depends, but usually you can stretch out content a lot.
My question is, do you have a favorite DJ that you work with, like sort of on a freestyle way? And are you able to like go with the mood, like back in old school days with house music, you would like grow the music to the night? So can you like work with a DJ, and like, do you have to know the records ahead of time or some sense of it, or can you just ride with the music?
I can definitely ride with the music, but it's helpful when you know the artist, and even on not just the level of their individual tracks that they play, but their whole kind of vibe and aesthetic. Like one of my favorite DJs to do visuals for is Gaslamp Killer. I don't know if anyone knows Gaslamp Killer, but he's got such energy with what he's doing that if I'm doing visuals, I feel like I have to be on point, and it's kind of like just, you know, trying to ride this crazy energy, and it keeps, you know, I feel like I have to have constant attention towards it. And so yeah, he's probably my favorite by far to play for, yeah, in a kind of freestyle sort of way.
I have a follow-up question about like kind of your relationship with the DJ or the musician. Like, are you ever in a situation where like you're displaying visuals and he's responding to those, like kind of the reverse? Like a lot of times you're probably responding to the music, but is there ever like that loop kind of flipping around or anything like that?
That's interesting, because there's definitely been a lot of people that have said, you know, I want to see the visuals when I'm playing, and then we try to figure out ways to make it happen. You know, there's like a mirror or a screen, and usually I don't think they're really looking at it, even if we spent the time. But I think the one person where maybe there might be that component is Flying Lotus, because he actually gets to see what I'm doing because of the nature of our setup, which is actually 2 screens, one scrim in front of him and one rear projection screen. So we create a kind of 3-dimensional show that, yeah, you know, it's funny. This is something I totally forgot to play. Here we go. All right. It's ridiculous. All right. So you can see that actually, because the screen is in front of him, he gets to see what I'm doing, which also means that if I mess up in a critical, at a critical point, which I've done before, he gets to like call me out directly on the mic and say, "Dave, you're fucking up," and then I, you know, get way into it in an even more fundamental way to, you know, so yeah.
How did you begin the process to creating like Strangeloop Studios in your own company?
It's a process I'm still figuring out, because I feel like a very wild-eyed character that maybe shouldn't be creating this huge business venture or something. But it's been really an organic process of just, you know, aggregating all these incredible people together to work on the projects, and just people that I really respect and trust, and as artists first and foremost, and then there is a whole business component, but it's something that, you know, I've been learning over time, and primarily the idea is just to make sure it doesn't get stale, to just keep moving forward and doing different things and trying out new things, and not letting it get kind of stagnant. And I think that Teaching Machine for me is a part of that too, because it's not, you know, it's not my company, but it's really a lot of creative people working together on various projects that just inspire them, regardless of the monetary, you know, value of it or whatnot. And so a lot of times people that are in Teaching Machine kind of get brought into different Strangeloop projects, and it's more like a, you know, an incubator for a lot of different people to really experiment and find their own form with it, because I think that especially with this sort of media, it's not that there's a way to do it in place. It's really like anyone who's doing something truly interesting, they're figuring it out as it's happening. It's not like, you know, okay, here's how you develop the film, and here's how you do this and that. It's pretty new on a lot of levels. So, so I just have organically really been very lucky to be around really brilliant people who teach me as much stuff as I teach them, and one of them's sitting in the room right here, Alec. But yeah, it's really kind of an organic process of building the business and keeping sort of our integrity in a way, because, you know, we don't want to just be doing visual shows just to do them and not have a sort of voice in the process, and be creating something that we're proud of and interested in. So it's definitely, yeah, it's a process, and it continues to change.
You talk a lot about like control and like having like creative choice and stuff. How does that work in when you have like an artist who comes in? Sometimes does it happen and it's like, oh, we just really want this, and you have to like push back and fight them on that, or?
It's complex. It's really complex, and you know, and sometimes there's aesthetic ideas that I disagree with or whatnot, but that's all creative collaboration too, and hopefully it is in that realm of kind of creative collaboration, not just like, oh, we need something put on these screens, and I've been in those circumstances too, but you know, if you're actually working with people that are excited about the medium, what you can do with it, and want to have a show that reflects their artist and the artist's ideas, then it's really, it's very different from camp to camp, but you know, it's a process where you're discussing all these things and looking at imagery and figuring out the, you know, the balance between, you know, I might have some like wild-eyed idea that I think is great, but really, you know, once you put it in the kind of crucible, the crucible of all these people, you know, working on a show, then you arrive at a better idea just because there's enough, you know, sort of back and forth to, you know, to have an emergent property which is better than, you know, my idea or their idea. But it's definitely different, and it's a challenge, certainly from, you know, camp to camp. And sometimes I just want to make really, really crazy stuff that maybe, you know, doesn't fit, and that's where I just go and I make some short film, or I do it myself and don't necessarily have to bring that into the you know, like a big pop visual show.
Thanks. What are your feelings on the 2D visuals? Like, for example, some of your Captain Murphy work, or the album cover art for You're Dead, as opposed to most of your 3D renderings?
So I should clarify that the album artwork for You're Dead was done by a Japanese artist named Shintaro Keigo, and the promo that I was showing you was something that I animated, but the actual drawings are the work of Shintaro Keigo. And it's the same with Captain Murphy work, that those were drawn by, I believe, an artist named Little Fuchs, who's a part of Adult Swim's crew. And so I'm normally involved more on the kind of editing and sometimes animating of these things, and the live invocation of them than the 2D drawing. But I could totally see how you might make that association, because I am, you know, I do work in 2D with drawings and paintings and that sort of thing. But
I guess, and my question mainly is, what are your feelings? Like, why more the 3D renderings, and do you ever feel like you should approach more of these 2D visuals the way you do, the way you work and edit with these other artists' 2D visuals? Like, what are your feelings on 2D?
I think it's bizarrely a realm I would like to explore more, because I think what I've been trying to do for a long time is almost the opposite of get more dimensionality out of everything that, you know, I'm looking at, which is why I use a lot of, you know, really like sort of tweaked focal lengths and just trying to like stretch out space and time and really kind of create more depth. And also layer 3, the Flying Lotus show, is about that as well, trying to get more depth in the concerts and have something that you can kind of dive into, as opposed to that just sits on a screen and you know it's a screen that's flat, to kind of destroy that sense of what it actually is and reveal some other hyperdimensional reality or something. And but I think that, you know, I would love to at some point incorporate more drawing, because it's something I love to do, but I haven't found the right fit in terms of incorporating it into a visual show. And I mean, we did some like paintings that I helped direct, but I wasn't actually creating them. My friend Micah was creating them for Earth, Wind, and Fire, which seemed to kind of fit, because a lot of their album artwork over the years was, you know, these beautiful paintings, kind of retro futurist paintings. And so we actually produced new work that was kind of in line with that aesthetic, and we actually did have, you know, paintings that now are in my house that we then digitized and created kind of 3-dimensional landscapes out of, that you could move a camera through. And yeah, so, but it was great starting from that actual material, you know, stuff, and actually someone really drawing and you know, painting the stuff with their hands. And I agree, it'd be a cool place to move.
Yeah, you even mentioned the infinite fractals.
Yeah.
A lot of those that you see are those actually 2D animations, but you see a lot of that Z space, and you know, you see a lot of Z space as well, like the infinite zooming.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering, you know, how do you feel about that? Because even right here, it's this infinite, like,
Yeah, I mean it's funny because it all definitely plays into the fundamental concept that I'm really curious about, which is strange loops. It's these kind of infinite universes that just you go somewhere, but then you end up back where you started, and there's kind of this this sort of paradox in time and space related with it, and so maybe that's one reason why I've been dealing a lot more with 3D to get that kind of effect. But obviously you can do it in 2D, and someone like Escher, who I mentioned earlier, really, all of his patterns have that kind of looping element and that paradoxical kind of element.
Is there anything you know now that you wish you'd known the first time you did a VJ show?
I guess to know that I didn't have to do it the way that other people were doing it, because that's, it's like anyone who starts getting into this world will have their own style if they dive deep enough and don't just kind of observe the trends and try to do what everyone else is doing, and that's really how people find their voice in this stuff. And I think earlier on I did wonder where I was playing some of this weird stuff, that fractals or whatever, and I thought this is like not what I'm seeing everywhere else in the concerts, which mostly was kind of very simple, very flat forms, moving around screens in time with music, and with the exception of some really phenomenal visual shows, but a lot of what was out there was not inspiring to me, but there was something that in me wondered, can I do this? Like, is this okay? Or, can I be really brash with it? And can I, cut it up and have strobes everywhere and just kind of say, fuck it, and like do whatever I want? And I learned over time that was quintessentially important to say, yeah, I can do that, and I don't care what anyone else thinks about it exactly. You can obviously get input over time and sort of refine your style, but that essential kind of need to express yourself even in a messy way, I think is really important. And so I wish maybe earlier on I'd known that a little bit more to save myself some headaches, but I think the headaches were also a part of it. So it's, I would just say to know that you can follow your intuition and make what you want to see and not worry too much about what people will think about it.
I was just wondering, like how much you work maybe on a not even necessarily daily basis on your own music, and like whether you've considered trying to put together like some sort of live performance of your own music with your own visuals and
yeah, I've done that before, and for the last 2 years I really haven't played as much music because I've been very busy with visual shows, but been waiting for that time when I can get back into it. And on a daily basis I do work on this stuff obsessively, which is why I'm so pale, and it's just like this endless kind of journey that I'm always trying to, make more interesting stuff. And I've been accused of being a workaholic, and I think that's definitely accurate.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.